Once there was a woodcutter with two children and their stepmother. The boy's name was Hansel, and the girl's name was Gretel. They lived so poorly that sometimes there was not even anything to eat. And then one evening he lay in bed, pondering how to feed the children further. His wife advised him to have children in the forest, light a fire, give a piece of bread each and leave them there, not all four of them die of hunger. But the woodcutter did not agree. And until then, his wife persuaded him that he finally agreed. And the children, because of hunger, also could not sleep and heard everything that their stepmother said to their father. And when the parents fell asleep, Hansel secretly rushed out of the house. The moon was shining brightly, and the white stones glittered like coins. Hansel pocketed as many of them as he could fit. Then he returned home and the children went to bed. In the morning, the stepmother came to the children, gave each of them a piece of bread, and they all went to the forest together. On the way, Hansel threw out white stones one by one. When they arrived at the clearing, my father began to light a fire. He ordered the children to sit near the fire and make sure that it didn't go out, while they and their stepmother would go for more firewood. They sat, tired, and fell fast asleep. When the children woke up, it was a dark night all around. And when a full month had risen in the sky, Hansel took his sister by the hand and went, looking for the way through the pebbles, which glittered like new coins, and showed them the way. They walked all night long, and at dawn they came to their father's house. Some time passed, and the children again heard how the stepmother one night began to beg their father to get rid of the children. He refused, but his wife did not want to listen to him. She cursed and expressed all sorts of reproaches to him. When the parents fell asleep, Hansel, like the last time, wanted to collect stones, but the stepmother locked the door and the boy could not leave the house. Early in the morning, the children were given a piece of bread each, even less than the previous time. On the way to the forest, Hansel shredded his piece in his pocket and threw the crumbs on the ground. The stepmother took them even further into the forest. Again a big fire was lit, and the father ordered the children to watch the fire while they and their stepmother chopped some more wood. When lunchtime came, Gretel shared her piece of bread with Hansel. And they fell asleep. We woke up when the dark night fell. And then a month came up, and they got together on their way, but they could not find a single crumbs, because thousands of birds fluttering in the forest had long been eating those crumbs. So the children walked for a very long time, but they could not get out of the forest. Suddenly, the road led them to the hut. Coming closer, the children saw that the house was all built of bread and biscuits, and the windows were made of pure sugar. Hansel reached up and broke off a piece of the roof, while Gretel went to the window and began gnawing at its windows. And then the door in the hut opened wide, and the old woman came out, leaning on a crutch. Hansel and Gretel were so scared that they even dropped their tidbits from their hands. And the old woman was kind and invited them to her hut. There was already abundant food on the table: milk, cookies, apples, and nuts. After dinner, the old woman made 2 clean beds for the children, and Hansel and her sister thought they were in heaven. But the old woman only pretended to be affectionate, but in fact she was an evil witch, who built her bread hut for this purpose in order to lure children. Early in the morning, while the children were sleeping, she took Hansel and put him in a small cage. And she ordered her sister to do everything that the wicked witch demanded of her. The old woman decided to fatten the boy in order to eat him later. So Gretel began to cook the most delicious food for Hansel, and she herself got nothing but leftovers. Some time passed, and the boy did not get fat. Then the old woman did not want to wait any longer, and decided to cook and eat Hansel. She ordered Gretel to light the stove and apply water. When the stove warmed up, the old woman ordered her to climb into the stove and see if it was hot enough. So she wanted to push the girl into the fire and bake her. But Gretel knew what was on her mind. She said that she did not know how to get in there, and asked the witch to show herself. The old woman got angry and climbed into the oven. Then Gretel pushed her and slammed the shutter behind the witch. Wow, how terribly the old woman hauled them. Gretel, meanwhile, rushed to Hansel and opened the cage. Having freed their brother, they went to the witch's room, in which there were boxes of pearls and precious stones in all corners, filled their pockets with them, and went home. For several days the children were looking for their way back. The forest seemed more and more familiar, and at last they saw their father's house in the distance. How glad he was to see his children alive. Hansel and Gretel poured on the floor all the pearls and gems they had taken from the witch. There was no need to think about food. And they began to live, live, and rejoice. And the father drove the evil stepmother out of the house. Once upon a time there was an old miller who had 3 sons. When the miller died, he left his sons a mill, a donkey, and a cat. The eldest got the mill, the middle got the donkey, and the youngest had to take the cat. The older brothers laughed at him, but the cat promised that he would make his younger brother rich if he gave him a pair of boots and a bag. The owner was surprised, but fulfilled the cat's request. The cat immediately pulled on his boots on his hind legs, poured oats into the sack, threw it over his shoulders, and went hunting. In the forest, he opened the bag, threw it on the ground, and hid himself in the thickets. He didn't have to wait long. A curious hare galloped to the sack and climbed into it to feast on oats. And the cat was just waiting for that. He jumped out of the thicket, tightened the sack, lifted it on his shoulders, and went to the royal castle. The king of that country was a great lover of good food. The cat bowed deeply to him, handed the hare, and said that it was a gift from his master, the Marquis de Carabas. The king was pleasantly surprised by this surprise. The cat bowed like a real nobleman and hit the road. The next day he went hunting with the sack again. This time he managed to catch 2 fat partridges. The king was delighted to see another pleasant gift. For several weeks in a row, the cat continued to wear partridges and hares to the king. But he did not say anything about this to his hungry and emaciated owner. Once the cat saw a princess in the palace. She was very beautiful. The cat realized that she would be a wonderful wife for his master. And so the king wanted to finally meet the Marquis. The cat replied that they could find him tomorrow for a walk where the mills were. And he himself ran at full speed to the mill. Seeing the owner, the cat said that tomorrow he will need to swim in the river, and then his life will change. The next morning, as soon as he got into the water, the cat grabbed his clothes and hid them in the bushes. At that moment the royal carriage appeared on the road. The cat jumped out onto the road and shouted at the top of his lungs, "Save me! Help! The Marquis de Carabas is drowning!" Hearing this, the king ordered to pull the Marquis out of the water. The miller's son got very frightened when 2 guards began to drag him out of the river, where he was basking in warm water. The king ordered to bring him his silk attire. The miller's son initially refused, but he liked the gold-embroidered clothes so much that he gladly put on the royal outfit. The king invited him to the carriage, where the beautiful princess was sitting. The miller's son was dumbfounded, but without further ado got into the carriage. A minute later, the carriage rolled on through the fields and meadows that belonged to the giant cannibal who lived in a huge castle. The cat wasted no time, and what was the spirit rushed ahead of the carriage towards the meadow, where the reapers were working in the sweat of their brow. He asked them to say that these fields belonged to the Marquis de Carabas, otherwise the evil cannibal will eat them. Before the astonished reapers could reply, the king's carriage pulled up. And when the king asked whose meadows they were, they answered in a friendly chorus that these fields belonged to the Marquis de Carabas. Meanwhile, the cat went straight to the man-eater's castle. With feline dexterity, he jumped over the stone wall and made his way into the castle. The cannibal was sitting at a large table laden with various dishes. Seeing the Puss in Boots, he was greatly surprised at such impudence. The cat began to tease the giant, and said that he could not turn into a lion. Before the cat had time to utter these words, the cannibal turned into a huge lion with a shaggy mane. The cat's soul went into his boots from fear, but he overcame it and said that the cannibal could never turn into a mouse. The terrible lion disappeared, and a small mouse appeared in its place. And that was all the cat needed. In the blink of an eye, he caught up with the mouse, caught it, and ate it. At this very time, the royal carriage drove into the castle courtyard. Opening the carriage doors, the cat bowed politely and said that he was glad to see everyone in the castle of the Marquis de Carabas. It is difficult to say who was more numb from amazement at these words, the king or the miller's son, who already did not understand anything at all. The cat took the guests to the table. At the end of the dinner, the king, having eaten to the fullest, said that the Marquis was indeed a very worthy man, therefore he would gladly give his daughter to wife. The princess was happy, young, handsome, and besides, she really liked the rich Marquis. Soon they played a wedding. So the miller's son married a princess and became a prince. All of them lived happily ever after, especially the cat, who proudly paced the palace in high boots.